It gets pulled from the ground, stepped on, cut down with the rest of the grass, without a second thought. For most people, it's just a weed, a plant that shows up where it's not wanted, in gardens, between paving stones, along fences and paths. It's not sold in stores, it's not featured in advertisements. And almost no one stops to think that it was once food, not rare food, not exotic, just normal. Common chickweed is one of those plants people ate every day, not because they wanted to, but because they knew it was always there. It grows fast, it tolerates cold, it appears early in spring and stays well into autumn. It doesn't need fertilizer, care, or good soil. That's why it survived where cultivated crops failed, and that's why people gathered it. For centuries, chickweed was used as ordinary green food. It was added to soups, eaten fresh, mixed with other plants. This wasn't survival food. It was everyday life. Our ancestors didn't call it a weed. They didn't divide plants into useful and useless. They divided them into what could be eaten and what could not. Chickweed belonged to the first group. It didn't need explanation. It had no legends. It wasn't a secret. It simply grew, and people simply knew what to do with it. Then something changed. As stores, standards, and proper crops appeared, knowledge began to disappear. Plants that didn't fit the new system stopped being considered food. Chickweed was one of them, not because it became dangerous, not because it lost its value, but because it became invisible. Today, we walk past it every day, and we never look down. What makes this plant easy to ignore is the same thing that once made it valuable. Common chickweed is not dramatic. It doesn't look powerful. It doesn't promise miracles. But nutritionally, it quietly does its job. Its leaves are tender and easy to digest. They contain vitamin C, along with minerals the human body needs in small but regular amounts, not in extreme concentrations, but in a form that could be eaten often. This mattered more than abundance. For people who didn't have supplements, labels, or measurements, food wasn't about maximizing nutrients. It was about steady support. Chickweed could be eaten raw, cooked lightly, added to whatever else was available. It didn't require processing. It didn't demand fuel, salt, or storage. It fit naturally into daily meals. That simplicity was its strength, but it also became its weakness. As agriculture changed, food stopped being defined by availability and started being defined by control. Crops were selected for size, uniformity, and predictability. Fields became places where only approved plants were allowed to exist. Anything else became a problem. Chickweed didn't disappear because it was harmful. It disappeared because it didn't belong. It spread too easily. It grew without permission. It ignored human plans, so it was labeled a weed. Once that word appeared, its role changed instantly. Not because the plant changed, but because perception did. A plant called a weed is no longer examined. It's removed, forgotten, erased from memory. Over time, knowledge followed the same path. Recipes vanished, names lost meaning, and a plant that once supported everyday life was reduced to something people stepped on. Today, chickweed still grows exactly as it always has. The soil hasn't rejected it. The seasons haven't changed its behavior. Only we have. We learned to trust shelves more than landscapes, packaging more than familiarity. And in doing so, we stopped recognizing what was already feeding us. Today, chickweed hasn't disappeared. It never did. It still grows in the same places, along garden edges, in shaded soil, between stones and paths. The plant didn't abandon us. We abandoned the habit of noticing it. In recent years, chickweed has quietly returned, not as a weed, but as something people are relearning to recognize. Foragers, wild food researchers, small communities interested in traditional diets, not because it's trendy, but because it works. Its leaves are still tender, still edible raw, still easy to add to simple meals. Nothing about it has changed. What has changed is the way we approach food. Modern systems prefer what can be standardized, measured, sold. Chickweed doesn't fit that model. It grows when it wants, where it wants, in amounts that don't scale neatly. And that's exactly why it was never meant to be a product. It was meant to be nearby. Of course, rediscovering old food doesn't mean ignoring caution. Not every place is clean. Not every plant should be gathered carelessly. Chickweed absorbs what's around it, so where it grows matters. Roadsides, polluted soil, treated lawns, these places turn food into risk. Knowing what a plant is also means knowing where it belongs. That knowledge used to be common. It didn't require books or experts. It was passed quietly through daily life. And when that chain broke, plants didn't vanish. Understanding did. Chickweed doesn't promise survival. It doesn't claim to cure anything. It represents something simpler, a time when food wasn't distant and nourishment didn't require explanation. Sometimes what we call progress is just distance. Distance from the ground, from seasons, from the small things that once sustained us. And sometimes all it takes to see that is to slow down and look at what's growing beneath our feet.